Welcome everybody, I'm Santiago Nieland and this is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. Today we're continuing with our series, our 5-episode series of the revelations of the dispensations of the time when the truth of God, of the universe, of how we fit into all of this was revealed to us. And we have to understand that many things or many ways what we're doing as a human species is we're discerning and we're understanding, we're evolving our religions to our progression or our progress as a civilization. But there are instances where we have revealed religion, where God and the celestial agencies present information that steers us in the right direction. So in this episode, I'm really excited because we have Derek Grimm again, which I love the way that he presents this. It's he really makes it very clear. I don't know if he's or was, because I know he's not a teacher, but he would have made a great teacher because he trains it really, really good. So we're going to be talking about Jesus. This is very interesting because he is the fourth revelation. But today we're going to step into one of the most profound questions ever asked. Who is Jesus really? Not just a teacher from Nazareth, but the cosmic being behind the story. According to the teachings explored in the Urantia Book, the life of Jesus on earth was part of a much larger narrative, a story stretching back hundreds of thousands of years throughout rebellion, recovery, and preparation from one extraordinary moment in planetary history. In this episode, we're going to explore how Earth's long journey set the stage for his arrival, who Jesus actually is in the universe beyond our planet, and why his life, death, and resurrection still shape the spiritual destiny of humanity today, and not only humanity, but the universe in large. So let's begin. Thanks for visiting once again, Derek. It's a pleasure.
Happy to be back. This is a great topic.
Yes, and I think it's kind of getting to the conclusion and setting the right interpretation of Jesus. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think so too. Absolutely. Yeah.
So before we dive into Jesus, let's kind of make a recap of the story so far of what's been happening. So the story so far and this long road to Jesus is that we have to understand that the world that he arrived on, Earth or Urantia, has a long and complicated spiritual history. According to the broader cosmic narrative, this planet experienced rebellion, broken leadership, and interrupted missions meant to guide humanity's development. From the betrayal of planetary administrators to the struggles of Adam and Eve, the emergency intervention of Melchizedek, humanity's story became one of survival and a spiritual persistence. By the time Jesus was born, the world wasn't simply waiting for a savior. It was a planet that had been holding on to the light of truth for a very long time. So tell us, Derek, what are the circumstances and what is the world that we have?
Okay. Big story.
Yes.
We've spent a few episodes going through the details, but just as a recap, first of all, civilization is meant to be a co-creative process between divinity and humanity. Mm-hmm. And this is accomplished in stages. And we've talked about the first 3 stages that happened the first 2 stages that happened on our planet, and they failed. So the first stage was the arrival of our planetary administration. And the leader of that administration is called a planetary prince. They arrived 500,000 years ago, approximately. And they set up shop in what is now Mesopotamia, and they built a city, and it functioned, and they functioned as planetary administration for 300,000 years. And so 300,000 years. 200,000 years ago, Lucifer decided that he could do things better, and he launched a rebellion. And Lucifer, being the administrator of our local area of inhabited worlds, went to all of the inhabited worlds and tried to get everybody to go along with him. And to his eternal discredit, our leader, his name is Caligastia, in advance betrayed our planet to this rebellion.
Okay.
So basically, cut us all out. Like the result of that, going into rebellion, is that we're quarantined, isolated, and cut off from the rest of the universe and administration, so that it doesn't spread beyond where it already is.
Yeah, it's like a cancer, so it
So
stays into one place and it doesn't infect everything, right?
it's exactly that. Exactly. Yeah, a
Yeah.
cancer. I think that's a really good description.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah, yeah.
spiritual
Well,
cancer. Yeah,
and just to make this a side note, I think everything, and that's the beauty about the universe. I mean, if you look at the patterns and the in models in how things work, we understand that cancer are rebellious cells that are not following their intended process. And what you have to do is you have to extract them, and this is
yeah,
what happens. In different stages. We as humans, as individuals, as a collective as well, if we're not following the plan, then what you do, you isolate and you extract. So this is interesting, and this is a little bit of to put into context of what a rebellion is and how it works,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So we're isolated. It plunged us basically into darkness and confusion. All of the benefits and growth that occurred over the previous 300,000 years gone. Plunged us back into barbarity, basically. Um, there was a visible staff of 100, 100, I guess you could call them superhumans, and
Mm-hmm.
they had 100 associates behind them, and we talked about them. That's the Anunnaki, and their
Mm-hmm.
associates were called the Igigi or Igigi. Um, they split, and they split basically 60-40 among the primary 100, and the 60 went into rebellion, and the 40 stayed loyal to the universe. And the leader of the loyal Anunnaki, his name was Van, and he basically kept the light of truth and civilization going for approximately 160,000 years from then, all the way down to the arrival of the second bestowal, which we spoke about,
Yeah.
Adam and Eve. Now,
Interesting. Yes.
Adam and Eve came. If we're looking back from here, it would be about 38,000 BC, 38,000 years
Okay.
ago. Um, and they had a pretty huge mission ahead of them, right? So, first of all, they were here. They had to somehow try to rescue the planet from this barbarity and confusion and chaos as best they could. They were also here to biologically upstep
Mm-hmm.
the human gene pool, because they were physical beings, but they were divinely created beings, and part of what they do, not just on our planet, on every planet gets an Adam and Eve, but
Yeah.
their purpose is to um, skillfully and strategically inject their divine DNA genetics into the human gene pool.
Correct.
Yeah. And
And let me
so,
let me make
yeah,
a side note as well here, and because I think a lot of what we know from myth, from urban legends, from things about that are out there, and maybe sometimes that you can't thread them all along. I mean, we talked about superhuman demigods, and we see a lot of that in prehistory there were these superhumans, and in myth how these civilizations came down and everything. So that
yeah,
makes a lot of sense. We know the story of Adam and Eve from the Bible, and I mean, we're clarifying how they were not the first humans, but they had this special mission, and they
yeah,
had brought here the uplifting not only of, in practical terms, but also in biological terms, the genetic gene pool. And also one of the things that we've always, it's been out there is that there was a race of aliens that came here, and they are the ones that we're that byproduct of those aliens that came here. This is the story. These are the aliens, right? That came
yeah,
with that, in
yeah,
a sense.
yeah,
It wasn't that they
yeah,
came in, with the big eyes and the spacecraft and just injected us. It was this story. So it's interesting how, you know, once you take the covers away, once you reveal it, it all makes sense, and it's really practical to understand, right?
yes. And it's all part of a divine plan for
Yeah,
every inhabited planet, right?
correct.
So the way that they do this genetic upstep to the human gene pool is they basically create a huge pool of their own progeny. And once it
Mm-hmm.
gets to a certain level, I think on most worlds it's 1 million, but on our world, they were going to start at 500,000
Yeah.
or 500,000. Yeah. Um, what they do is they basically sort of send them out and selectively start blending with the indigenous races on the planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you said, we were talking about demigods and stuff like that. We have an example in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh is described in his inheritance as being 2/3 God and
Mm-hmm.
1/3 human. So that means that's basically us being told that he's 2/3 Adam and Eve's progeny and 1/3 indigenous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So awesome stuff.
Oh,
I love that.
and
Yeah.
you see
Yeah.
this everywhere. You see in Greek myth, it's all plagued with the world of the gods and then the world of the humans and these demigods that are there. You go to Americas, you go to South Pacific, and there's also these stories of these beings that had superpowers that were able to, kind of organize and coordinate a civilization. So you see it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome,
Absolutely. Yeah.
awesome.
So we also heard how Adam and Eve defaulted in their mission.
Mm-hmm.
They made some pretty serious mistakes, and that basically robbed them of their immortality, which was essential to the success of this mission of blending their progeny with the indigenous races of the planet. Um, and that was a terrible thing. They were basically degraded to mortals.
Yeah,
Be,
yeah.
and that meant that they were going to die. And they did die. Adam died at, I think it was 530 years old, and Eve died 19 years before Adam did. So they eventually did die. And what this did was it ended 460,000 years
Mm-hmm.
of continuous presence, physical presence of and representation of the spiritual government of our planet.
This is interesting and this is important
Yeah.
because
It,
up to that time, there were gods living among us, divine beings living among us, and if not, being directly responsible for what was happening on the planet, were part of that history. They're involved in
yeah.
that history and steering of humanity
Yeah.
across its evolution. Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Great.
So, yeah.
At this
Without
moment, that ends. That we're left in
it's
the
gone.
darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's this huge hole now, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're basically wandering around in the dark, not knowing what's going on, really. Eh,
Mm-hmm.
except for our own personal spiritual leadings and things like that, which we'll get
Yeah.
into a little bit more today. Um, so without these overarching Adam and Eve immortal beings to manage all of this, the
Mm-hmm.
civilization as it starts blending with the surrounding peoples starts sinking down to the level of the surrounding civilizations because there's no one to keep holding it up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To
Because
uplift them.
Adam and Eve are gone.
Yeah.
But before that completely flattens out, um, this blending of Adam and Eve's race we can call them the Adamites, Adam and Eve, Adamites,
Mm-hmm.
and the indigenous races, and then we also spoke about the Nephilim, who are the
Mm-hmm.
descendants of the rebel planetary administration way back 200,000 years ago, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
all start blending and they create this mighty race.
Mm-hmm.
And this mighty race, they're the megalithic builder culture that all of the what do you call them, the ancient astronaut people and Graham Hancock and
Yeah.
those researchers, they're looking at all of the remnants of these megalithic structures that were built, and they're looking for the
The
race of people
The
who,
Göbekli Tepe and all those sites, right?
yeah, yeah, and the pyramids, and
Uh,
the stuff that's in Pumapunku in South America,
yeah.
and there's some stuff in Indonesia and Southeast Asia. It's just all over,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And it's megalithic, like it's made with these stones that we can barely budge today with our machinery and technology. It's pretty amazing stuff. This is the culture that built it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's called the Andite culture in the Urantia
Yeah.
Book.
Okay.
So that's the blending, and it blends into this mighty race. And then it starts, because there's no more of Adam and Eve's progeny being produced pure. It starts sinking and blending into the level of the surrounding.
Dissolving, let's say diluting.
Yeah.
All right.
It dilutes. Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Right. So it's the apex of that culture is probably around 15,000 BC or so.
Okay.
That's when it really hit its height and starts really degenerating from there. So during this time, after Adam and Eve die, actually after they defaulted,
Yeah.
the reins of spiritual government fell back into the hands of Melchizedek receivers. And we spoke about the Melchizedeks in the last episode, right?
Yes.
So the Melchizedeks are a divine order of beings. It's not just one guy. It's a divine order of beings. And usually when something goes wrong on a planet or in a system of planets or something like that, it's usually the Melchizedeks who step in to take control and sort of get things going back on the right path.
Correct.
They are considered emergency sons, among other things. Their functionality in the universe is really diverse. They're a very high order of being, and they have their fingers in all the pies, so to speak. So
Yeah.
So when something goes wrong, they're the ones who can really step in and take control and
Yeah.
start getting things back on the right trajectory, right?
Yeah.
So from Adam and Eve dying, say, 37,000 years ago or so, all the way down to about, in our story right about now, we're at 3000 BC.
Yeah.
These 12 Melchizedek receivers who have taken control of the planetary administration are sort of looking at this, right? And they know that Jesus is coming.
Yeah.
Because Jesus has said, I'm going to bestow myself on earth.
Yeah, he chose this planet to be his bestow, which we're gonna get to in the next segment. But yeah, he chose this planet.
Yeah. So they know he's coming, and they're starting to get worried, really concerned, because the level of civilization is degrading, and it's going back into barbarity. And while there's been an upstep evolutionarily and biologically because of Adam and Eve's genetics, spiritually things are really taking a nosedive.
Okay.
And the light of truth on the planet really was at about the level of a glowing ember.
Okay.
There wasn't a flame, it wasn't a bright light, it was almost going out, and they were concerned. So they recognized this crisis. They knew Jesus was coming and he was preparing to come. What are they going to do to help this out, right?
Yeah.
So they decided one of them was going to volunteer to do what's called an emergency bestowal. So this isn't a normal bestowal that's part of the overarching bestowal plan for every planet. This is an emergency intervention. And one of these 12 Melchizedeks physically incarnated on the planet as a looking like a human being, right?
Okay.
And his name was Macaventa. So we know him as Macaventa Melchizedek.
Yeah.
And he's the Melchizedek that everybody knows from the Bible. So now we're talking, they realized this crisis about 3,000 years before Jesus came.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking, this incarnation happened, we're told, 1,973 years before Jesus is born. So it's about
Correct.
2,000 years before Jesus now.
All right.
And he came for two very, very specific reasons. He's not here for the purpose of, uplifting us biologically, and he's not here in the capacity of, doing another kickstart stage to civilization or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
His only purpose was to rekindle the light of truth on the planet, the truth about God the Father,
Okay.
about a monotheistic deity. I think is
Yes.
better to say that than God the Father. That's more of a Jesus thing.
Yeah.
And the other thing was to build some sort of foundation that would be there for Jesus to work with when he arrived. Those are the
Great.
only two things that he was here for.
Okay.
And so very, very limited in scope in terms of what he was here to do compared to what a normal bestowal
And
is,
very
right?
important because if
Yeah,
not, I mean, the sequence of things without the foundation of a monotheistic religion, would have been really hard to, present the teachings. Awesome. Awesome.
exactly. Yeah. So his plan, obviously to rekindle the light, he basically founded a school
Yeah.
in what is now Jerusalem. Back then it was Salem, and he was known as the Sage of Salem. And Abraham was there. He was the star pupil, so to speak, and he ran the, I don't want to say community because it was bigger than that. It was a city.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people there, and he trained missionaries, and he sent them out all over the world. And those missionaries and the things that they taught all over the world become the foundation for all of the things that the Abrahamic religions have in common.
Yeah.
And not just the Abrahamic religions, it's other later religions. There's commonalities in Confucianism, there's commonalities in Buddhism.
Yeah. Because they spread out everywhere.
Yeah.
They took those
And
teachings.
those teachings find their origin way back in Melchizedek.
Awesome.
So incredible influence so he was very successful in rekindling that light, and the light is still very much shining. In terms of creating this foundation for Jesus to work with, his plan was to have Abraham's descendants really transform into kind of a spiritual race. I know if
Yeah.
race is the best word, but it's because it's
A
not
brotherhood.
genetically
Let's
speaking
put
so
it
much,
that way.
but
Like a brotherhood.
kind of a race.
Yeah. Yeah.
A brotherhood,
Yeah.
kind of a race. But what their purpose was going to be was they were going to be inaugurated by Jesus as these spiritual light bringers and guides, and that would go out to uplift the whole world. Right? That
Okay.
was the plan. That was Melchizedek's plan. Right?
We didn't get there, but far enough to
Yeah,
set the stage for what was going to happen, right?
exactly.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
that was his plan. So he stayed for about 90 years, and then he felt things were going as good as they could be. Abraham was sort of running things, and he needed to leave well in advance of when Abraham actually died to make sure that things would continue on. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Well, and because we have to go to the next segment, and I think that's setting the stage for Jesus. So I
yeah,
think we covered
yeah,
everything where we're at before we jump into Jesus, right?
little bit. There's one more
Okay.
thing that we have to
All right.
cover, if that's
Please.
okay.
Yes, yes, please.
So we're talking about these bestowals and this normal bestowal plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so after Adam and Eve, what usually is supposed to happen is towards the end of Adam and Eve's we can call it a dispensation. Their dispensation's about 25,000 to 30,000 years usually, right? Usually towards the end of this age, there's a flowering interest in art, music, literature, a universal interest in intellectual realities like true philosophy. Religion becomes less nationalistic and more planetary.
Okay.
And concrete steps towards true worldwide peace are being taken. So this is on a normal planet now, right?
Yeah.
So this is what it's usually like at the end of Adam and Eve's age,
And where we're at.
dispensation,
Yeah.
right? And at that point, what the next stage or the next bestowal son who comes is a divine being who comes directly from paradise, the central universe, right from paradise. And the mission is called a magisterial mission. This is a magisterial son who comes. And they it's like another stage of the rocket, and they just kickstart things even more, right? And that's the whole idea of sending a series of bestowals is you've got your first stage and it keeps going. Second stage kickstarts it even more. Third stage even more. So that's what's supposed to happen. But obviously 2,000 years ago, we weren't in that position at all, were we?
So we had a special dispensation instead of the regular dispensation, let's say.
Yeah. So even before Jesus now, who we're going to start talking about, we've already had an emergency bestowal to prepare for a special bestowal.
Exactly.
So
that's the thing. Well, awesome. This really sets everything up, and well, stay tuned, and we're going to find out what's happening. On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.